I'm Kotz, I'm one of the pastors here, and we are finishing up the series called The Good Life. We've been looking at the Beatitudes. It's the introduction to the greatest sermon ever preached by Jesus. So this is a sermon on a sermon, which is kind of awkward. In case you're not familiar with the book of Matthew, I want to give you a quick illustrated overview of what the Sermon on the Mount looks like. So here it is. This is a little diagram I created, and we just finished here. Okay, so in case you're wondering where we are in the whole sermon, the Sermon on the Mount, we're right here. It starts off with like an introduction, and there's a conclusion, and next week we're going to start a new series. It's going to be on something else, but then after that we're going to come back and start from the middle section right here. So in case you're wondering where we are on the map, on the road map, this is where we are right now. I want to focus in on, next slide, I want to focus in this section right here because in order to understand what this is, we have to understand what's around it. Okay, so let's zoom in, next slide. The first section here, this is from the end of chapter 4 to the beginning of chapter 5. This is the setting. So Matthew, the author, basically gives us like, hey, this happened by the lake. There's a mountain there. Jesus went there, and then there's a whole group of people. Jesus was healing people, and the people who were listening to Jesus preach were these people. And he gives like a list. He says there were like people who were sick, people who were terminally ill. There were people who were marginalized by society. There are people who are demon possessed. There are people who are having strokes. People like they just go through this long list of people who are there. Okay, and then so if you look at it and you understand the kind of people Jesus is preaching to, the setting of this story is this: that these people were the zeros. Okay, like the people who are considered to be like in any society, you would not look at them and say, now that's my goal, or I want my kids to grow up to be like them. These are the people that were usually like, oh, these are the losers. These are the people who didn't make it. These are the people who grew up with regret. These are the people who we wish them well, but that is definitely not something that anybody would have like on their goal board. Like, oh, by the time I'm 40, I want to do this. By the time I'm 50, I want to do this. Like, being poor in spirit, being a zero is not on that list. So Jesus is preaching to people who were not included in the high societal things. Okay, so that's the first part. And then here, the Beatitudes, we went, the last few weeks, we've been talking about every single one of them. Poor in spirit means that you are a zero, you are like a loser. And he says, those people, they have the good life. Like, I don't know why Jesus would say that. Like, Jesus says, these people are blessed. They have the good life. They are the people that God is with. And then second on the list are the people who mourn, right? The people who mourn. Like, these are the people who are grieving because they experience loss. And then he says, those are the people that God is with. And then he goes to the next one. He's like, blessed are the people who are meek. The people who, well, God promised them good things, and they haven't received it yet. And these are the people who are like, I'm willing to wait in line. I'm not going to, if I see the opportunity, I'm not going to steal it from somebody. I'm not going to cut in line. I'm not going to cheat the system because he's like, those people who are patiently waiting for God to bless them, those are the people that God said have the good life. And then after that, we have the people, he said, people who hunger and thirst for righteousness. The word there, the right word, righteousness, is the same word for justice. You see the broken systems of the world and you say, I just want, it just aches so much that I want the world to be fixed. And then after that, we have the people who are merciful. We looked at the Greek word for that. People who are merciful are the people who feel the pain of other people who are less fortunate. Like when that person is denied certain human rights, they're like, oh, it hurts inside. I feel their pain. Maybe a better word there is compassion or empathy. He says, if you are that person who aches for other people's pain, he says, I am with you. I'm on your side, right? And then after that, he says, people who are pure in heart. People who he said, so there are people in this world who they're not living the life that God intended them to live. Like God created them in a specific way, and over time, over the years, you've added on other things into your life, and it's not you anymore. So the people who start cutting off the parts of your life that does not really belong, the people who are becoming more and more pure, the person that they're meant to be, God says, I am on your side. And then after that, we have the peacemakers. These are the people who look at the world and say, I think now that I'm like a new creation, I can't live on just looking at the brokenness of the world. I got to do something about it. If there's a system that's hurting somebody, I need to do something about it. These are the peacemakers. The word peace in the Hebrew is the word shalom. It doesn't mean a lack of chaos. It means the world as it was meant to be. And then finally, after that, he says, blessed are the persecuted. And it's not just persecuted because somebody's being mean to you. Persecuted here means you try to do something right in the world. You try to fix it. You try to look out for the people who are less fortunate. And because when you're trying to change something in the world that benefits the people who are not well regarded, the people who it does benefit, they push back because they want to conserve the world the way it is, right? And so you get hurt. People push back on you. People persecute you. And he says, if that happens, I'm on your side. So you can see that this isn't just a random list of 8 characteristics. They're basically a list. It's like a story. You start off as somebody who's poor in spirit, and God transforms you. And when you get to the bottom, you're fixing the world. You're contributing to the world to become a better place. But because of the persecution you face, you're brought back to the top, and now you're poor in spirit again. And you just go through this over and over and over. And he says, he's giving this message to these people, the people who are sick, people who are poor, people who are outcasts, people who have no voice in society, people who are hurt, people who are terminally ill, people who are outcasts because they are foreigners. He says, blessed are you because you're about to go on this crazy journey. And so this part, I want to call this the resurrection cycle, right? You go through it and you go through it again and again and again. So he's giving like a little preview of what their life is going to be once they start following Jesus. And then we have this next section that we're going to look at today. But let's just say we don't know what this is about. Question mark. Next slide. There we go. Question mark. We don't know what this is about. But the following section, okay, is going to give us a clue as to how we're supposed to interpret this section. Are you guys tracking so far? Okay, because in my mind I'm making sense, but I don't know if it's making sense to you guys. Okay. So here's the first line of the next section. This is how it goes. It says, do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. In other words, Jesus is saying something here, right? And then the audience is thinking, did Jesus just say that we should ignore the Old Testament? And Jesus is like, no, like, I'm here to tell you, I don't want you to think that I have come to abolish the law and the prophets. So there's something that he says here that makes people question if Jesus is loyal and loyal to the Old Testament. Does it make sense? So we have to read this as if it's some kind of a controversial statement that Jesus is making. What did Jesus say here that make people scratch their heads and say, excuse me? Like, is this a cult? Is this something that, should we get my rabbi in here? Because I feel like you're ignoring the law of the Old Testament. So, let's take a look at this section. We're going to start at verse 13. Here we go. He says this, you are the salt of the earth. You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, and the Greek here basically says, if the salt becomes foolish, like the salt becomes moronic, which is weird. So the translators use the word, it loses saltiness. How can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. So what is Jesus talking about? You are the salt? You raise people's blood pressures? What is he talking about? Well, if you want to know what the word salt meant symbolically in the Old Testament, in the Jewish culture, because this was written to them, I'll just go over the 3 that are mostly represented in the Bible. So the word salt in the Bible, right? There's 3 main ways that people took the word salt symbolically. The first one is this. It's this form of flavor. It's like, oh, Jesus, are you telling us that we are going to be the ones that flavors the world? Like, the world is boring, and we're going to add flavor to it, right? It's like the chef that you see, oh, yes, you go like this, and then the salt sprinkles, and so good. Is that what Jesus is talking about? Is that who we are? Are we supposed to be bringing flavor to the world? Could be. The second symbolic meaning of the word salt is this, preservation. So back in those days, they didn't have refrigerators. And so they're like, how do we keep food from going bad, especially raw food? What should we do? They learned that if you add salt to it, it preserves the food longer than if you didn't add salt to it. So the second is, so Jesus, are you telling us that the world is about to burn down, but we are the reason why the world is still around, because we keep the world preserved? Could be. The third way that salt is used in the Old Testament is purification. So if they weren't sure if the water was clean, they would add salt to it and it would be purified. But not only that, for religious purposes, God would say, if you want to give something to me in offering, and because I'm a pure God, you need to add salt to your offering because it purifies it. So these are the three. Okay, there's flavor, preservation, and purification. Purification, like Jesus, what are you saying? Are you saying that we are the ones that's going to purify the world, that the world is all messy and it's dirty and we're here to clean it up? Is that what you're saying, Jesus? Could be. So which of these three does Jesus have in mind when he says you are the salt of the earth? Turns out, like a lot of scholars, I would say 95% of scholars say that it's actually this one right here, preservation. What do they mean by, what does Jesus mean by preservation here? Like I said, in the ancient Jewish culture, this was written 2,000 years ago, there was no such thing as refrigerators. So for them to preserve something, okay, like if they had food and it went bad in a week, or maybe less than a week, then they would starve, they would die, right? So in a way, preserving food was directly related to life. So because food is life and salt made food last longer, the word salt started to mean endurance. Okay? So in the Bible, now this part I might lose you, so I'm going to try my best. In the Bible, there's this phrase that's used in the Old Testament several times called the salt covenant. Salt covenant. That means God makes a promise with the world or with certain people or individuals, okay? And he says, if that promise is not just for now, but it's a long-lasting promise, they called it a salt covenant. It's a long, enduring, long-lasting promise of God. That's a salt covenant. Here's an example in the book of Leviticus. This is when God is giving them instructions on how to give sacrifices to God. He says, season all your grain offerings with salt. Why? Because we want something to last for a long time. Do not leave the salt of the covenant of your God out of your grain offerings and add salt to all your offerings. Like when you give something to me, sure, it is a purifying agent. But not only that, because of the promise, the deal, the contract that we're working on right now is not just for now, but it's going to be a long-lasting thing. I want you to symbolically add salt because that would mean that this promise is for a long, long, long time, maybe eternal, okay? So, because salt is an essential part of survival, they started to understand salt as something that is holy. And so he says, when you bring salt, when you bring an offering, and it represents a promise that's going to be made forever, make sure you add salt. The word salt covenant is used again in the book of 2 Chronicles. This is this right here. God is talking to a group of people, telling them, Israel is going to be ruled by King David. For how long? Well, him and his descendants, they're going to rule for a long time. This is what he says. Don't you know that the Lord, the God of Israel, has given the kingship of Israel to David and his descendants forever? How? How do we do that? Oh, because there's a salt covenant, covenant of the salt. So just keep in mind, all you need to know, this is like a lot of Old Testament gibberish, right? Okay. All you need to know is when you think about salt in the Bible, it means it's a covenant. It's like a promise that lasts forever or for a very, very long time. Okay? That's what a salt covenant. A good representation of that today would be I remember when I was in elementary school, we're like, can I have that, please, please, please? I'll be your best friend. And you say, across my heart. It's like across my heart, but taken more seriously, right? Or like, I'll be your friend forever, or promise ring, what do you guys do? I had a friend who took me up his treehouse and he carved in my name and said, this means we're friends forever. And I haven't seen him since elementary school, but I guess I'm still his friend. But okay, so if it's like that, but it's taken more seriously. Okay, so that's what a salt covenant is. Okay? So now, what promise did God make with these people? In the book of Genesis, God pulled out a guy named Abraham, and he said, the world is all messed up. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a deal with you, Abraham. You are going to go into the world, and you're going to start fixing the world. You're going to make the world a better place. You're going to bless the world. But I know it's a scary place out there. So I will bless you so you can bless the world. That was the promise that God made. Okay? And it's like that is the promise. And eventually Abraham had kids, and they had descendants, and then there's it becomes a whole nation. And the promise is now with the nation. He's like, my people, Israelites, Jews, you guys, My promise is to take care of you so you could go out and fix the world. That's the salt covenant. That's the promise that he had with these people. Okay, so that's what you need to know. That when I say salt covenant, when the Bible says salt covenant, it means that God will bless his people, okay, because his people are going to go and bless the world. That's the promise. That's the deal. That's the contract that they signed. Okay? Now, when Jesus gives a sermon about how you are the salt of the earth, it kind of came off as controversial. This is N.T. Wright. This is what he said about that. He said, the original meaning that Jesus just said was a challenge to Jesus' own contemporaries. Meaning, when Jesus said, you are the salt of the earth, people were like, oh, ow, that hurts when you said that. Like, how could that? Is so offensive, Jesus. Now, we don't read it like that today because we kind of don't understand the culture back then. But when he said these words, it was offensive to them. Let's keep reading. He says, God had called Israel to be salt. So the salt covenant was a promise of what his people were supposed to do. But over time, these people were now called salt. Okay? So now they're called the salt. But Israel was behaving like everyone else. Like you're supposed to go and fix the world, but you're acting like everybody else, right? With its power politics, its factional squabbles, its militant revolutions, how could God keep the world from going bad if Israel, his chosen salt, had lost its distinctive taste? I like how N.T. Wright used all three of those images of salt in one paragraph. But anyways, so what's so controversial about what Jesus said? Let's look at what he said again. It says this. You are the salt of the earth. You. Who's the you he's referring to? Next slide. Look at this diagram again. Who's the you that he's talking about? The zeros. These people were not offended that God took the name tag off of the people, like the Israelites, right? Like these people. Like, you're not acting like salt anymore, so I'm going to peel that label off of you. They knew that was coming. Like there's all these people who can't, like these prophets, these people who can like, guys, you got to shape up because God's going to take that title off of you one day, right? It's like, no, he's never going to do that. It's a salt covenant, right? What's offensive is not that God took that tag off of the Israelites, or the God's people. It's who he decided to put the tag on. You see, these people were like, maybe one day we'll get it right. Maybe one day God will be like, okay, finally you're the salt again, you could do your thing. That's not what their concern was. Their concern was, and you're putting it on them? Some of these people aren't even Jewish. They're not descendants of Abraham, right? Like these people are the sick. Like really? These sick people are going to be the salt? They're the ones that's going to bless the world. You're going to bless them and they're going to, like the poor, really? Back then they believed that if you were poor, that God is not with you. It's like, really? These poor people, they're going to be the ones that... They're the ones that took my job? Like what? Outcasts. People who were like terminally ill, right? People who had no voice in society. People who were hurt. People who were foreigners. These are the people that God is saying, sorry people, my people, I'm going to take that job and put it on them. And that was so offensive. So let's look at this again. He says, you zeros, you losers, that's mean, okay, are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, if the salt becomes stupid, I guess that's the Greek word right there, how can it be made salty again? These people were like, I know we missed a few things, God, so just be patient. Like, we'll get our saltiness back. And God's like, I've waited for a very, 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 very long time. And I don't think you're getting your saltiness back. I don't think it's gonna happen. As a matter of fact, every prophet I sent, you have murdered because you didn't want to hear. Like every time God's like, get back on track, they're like, la, 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 and then kick him, right? Like that's what these people were doing. It's like, I don't think you're going to get your saltiness back. And then he said, it is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. What is he saying here? What he's saying here is this. Historically speaking, these people, because they were becoming more and more the kind of people that didn't want to bring life into the world, but bringing more death into the world, God said, have you noticed that right now there's a Roman occupation happening in your nation? And you feel like you're being trampled under their feet? You brought that upon yourself, buddy. So Israel was supposed to be my chosen people who were supposed to fix the world. And he says, sorry, I waited long enough. It's not going to happen anymore. And he says this instead, but now you, the zeros, you guys are my chosen people who will fix the world. This is like super offensive to the people. Like there's these religious leaders who went to school and they're like well respected in society, and they're like, oh, here's Jesus. What is he going to say? And the first thing he hears from them is, sorry, you had your chance. You've lost your saltiness, and I don't think you're getting it back. So I'm going to give it to the people that deserve it. Then he says this, in case like you're like, I'm not sure what Jesus was saying. He's like, here's another illustration to make my point clear. You are the light of the world. A light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. He uses two imageries here, but they're actually one. Now, remember, Israel was God's chosen people, right? These are the people like Abraham and their descendants. Like these are the people who are supposed to fix the world. And over time, God's like, I'm also going to give you a headquarters. It's going to be this land called Israel. And then he said, and here's the capital city. This is Jerusalem. So this city is going to be the most important city in your nation, right? You could call it like a city on a hill. So they're like, yeah, Jerusalem's a city on a hill. This is cool, right? We're the light. We're the light of the world. This is so cool. Now, over time, they're like, hey, if we are the city on a hill that is the light of the world, we should like make a big poster or a banner or something that represents that that's who we are. So about 150 years before the time of Jesus, they built this. Inside of the temple, they built this tall thing with lamps on top. And around Sukkot, which is like in the fall, they will light it up at night to let everybody know that they were the light of the world. This is an artist's rendering of what it looked like at night. Like it was so bright that people would say that at night it looked like it was daytime. Like this is how bright it is. So when they say that we're a light of the world sitting on a hill, they literally meant it, okay? Now, this idea that Israel is the light of the world, where did that come from? Where did that come from? Well, it came from the book of Isaiah. I know most people haven't read the book of Isaiah, so here's a quick general overview of Isaiah. So Isaiah, when he starts off his book, and there's like 60 plus chapters in there, so it's a long read. If you read through the first 3/4 maybe of the book, they refer to the city, next slide, the city on this hill, Jerusalem, as the light of the world. And they call the building a light of the world, okay? And they keep referring to the city or this building, the light of the world, the light of the world. So, next slide. So they literally built lamps on it and made it the light of the world. But about 42 chapters in, the authors of the book of Isaiah, they stop calling the building the light of the world, and instead they start calling the people who live in it the light of the world. The people are now the light of the world. And if you read on, they talk about how there's a king and he's the light of the world, but we're not going to get into that today. These are the people who are chosen by God to be the light of the world. These are the people who are holy and, all the religious words you think about. They're the covenanted people. Okay. But over the years, these people, the light of the world, were not emitting light anymore. As a matter of fact, they were bringing darkness into the world. And they even started using interesting terms like, you are supposed to be the light of the world, but instead you're putting like a bowl over your lamp so that people can't see your light anymore. So when Jesus says, you are the light of the world, and then he also says this, neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. This is a commentary. This is Jesus' commentary on his people. He's saying, you people, you guys, we're supposed to be the light of the world, but you're acting like you're putting a bowl over your light. In essence, this is what God's people did. They were supposed to be the light of the world, but instead they were bringing darkness into the world. Jesus, you were supposed to be the people who brought light into the darkness. People will look at you, the light of the world, and they'll be like, oh, is that what your God is like? But you no longer reflect who I really am. So can you imagine how painful it was for the people who are listening to him to hear this? You, and who's the you again? The zeros. It's like, I'm taking the label of light of the world off of your chest and I'm putting it on these people, the poor, the sick, the terminally ill, the people who are demon-possessed, the people who are foreigners. He's like, you are going to get that title now. God is taking away their job titles and giving it to the people who they believe was less qualified. That's what's happening here. Do you guys see why in the next section, which we're going to study like in a few months, the next section starts off with Jesus saying, guys, before you come at me, I'm not here to just erase everything in the Old Testament. That's not what I'm here for. Like, he has to kind of explain himself because what he says here is so controversial. So controversial. He's like, I'm not erasing the laws. I swear I'm not, right? Like, why would these lawless people become the new salt and the new light? Now, imagine now being the people who Jesus just pointed at and said, hey, you guys are the new salt. You guys are the new light. How are they feeling? They're like, whoa, we have that title now? Oh, well, what are we supposed to do? Like, am I supposed to read the Bible every day? Or am I supposed to pray every day? What am I supposed to do? No one ever told us how to be the light and salt. We don't want you to take this job description away from us. How can we make you happy? Or the question is, how are these zeros, right, supposed to be salt and light? Well, let's take a look at the little diagram here again. It started off the setting. The setting is, you guys are the zeros. You guys are the people who are pushed out of society. You guys, I'm going to take you on this journey of being a zero, but becoming a peacemaker eventually, and then the cycle starts over again. Okay? I'm going to take you on this journey. This is called sanctification. God's going to be transforming you from the inside out. And because of that, you have a more pure heart. You're becoming more and more the person that God intended you to be, right? And because of that, your heart breaks over the things that breaks God's heart. You're looking into the world, you're like, I need to change this, I need to change that, and you get persecuted for it, and you're at zero again, and you're going through this whole thing, right? And so he says, if you go through this and you let God work, then eventually you will naturally change. You will become a new person. You will become a new creation. You will be a new person. And when you do that, he says, I just want you to just naturally live your life. This is what he says. He says, this is Jesus continuing his sermon. He says, let your light shine before others. To which people are like, but we don't know how to do that, Jesus. We're like the zeros. How are we supposed to do that? He says, well, I want you to let your light shine before others so other people can see it, so that they, the people who see you, going through this cycle, they will see your good deeds. What does he mean by good deeds? Now, in the Greek, because this is written in Greek, there's two words in the Greek for good works. It's a single word. In English, good works is two words, but in Greek, there's two words, two separate words. One is the word agathos, and the other one is the word kalos. Agathos, and they both mean the same thing in English, but there's a connotation under these two words that we don't get when we just look at it in English. The word that's used here is the word kalos. Kalos. Now, agathos, the one that he didn't use, means good behavior. When God sees you behaving properly, then people will see that light. But that's not the word he used here. He used the word kalos. Kalos means to take something and make it beautiful. To make something more attractive. To make something more virtuous. So he says, I want you to let your light shine. Well, how do we do that? By letting God take you through these cycles of life and death, transforming you. And you just live your life naturally. Just live the way that you would normally live your life. And as you do that, they will see that you are out there creating beauty in the midst of where you're living. At work, at school, in your conversations, in your marriage. People would say like, oh man, Kotz is definitely not perfect. But I see that he's been changing over the years. I see a transformation in him. Like, I don't believe what these Christians believe, that somebody died and rose again from the grave and on the third day. But you know what? I can't deny the fact that these people, they are such loving people. Like my friend, who's this crazy Christian guy, he became a Christian a few years ago, and now today, it's like he's like a new person. So he says, as you live your life naturally through God's life and death and resurrection and this resurrection cycle, he says, when people see that kalos, the good deeds, he says that they'll see all that and they'll glorify your Father in heaven. Jesus says, when people see how you're transforming, how you're changing, they will look at you and say, I don't know if I believe in the things that they believe in, but man, God, if you are real, good job. Right? Maybe some people say, I want some of that in my life. My life is so broken. I really need to experience that same transformation. Now, I want to close with two observations about what Jesus just taught. The first one is this, that God has faith in the zeros. Did you notice that? That God is like, these people that were pushed to the side in society, these people, these are the people that I'm going to use. I have complete faith that they are the ones that's going to change the world. He believes in the zeros. He puts faith in the zeros. Now, notice he doesn't say, you will be the salt or the light. He doesn't say that. He says, you are the salt and light. These people who they just gathered and listened to him for the first time, he said, you zeros, you are the salt of the earth. He doesn't say you should be the salt in the earth. You have to do these things if you want to be. He's like, no. Just as you are, wherever you are in that process of the resurrection cycle, wherever you are, you already are the salt and light. Your unfortunate circumstance, wherever you are in life, does not disqualify you from being God's people. Wherever you are. His kingdom will be ushered in. This is what Jesus is saying. He's saying, God does not believe that his kingdom is going to be ushered in from the top down. He's saying that his ushering of this new kingdom, this new world he's creating, is going to start from the bottom up. Paul even makes a mention of this. He says, oh yeah, you know why God picks the humble and the people who are weak? It's so that eventually they will humble the people who are powerful and strong. It starts from the bottom up. So that's the first observation. The last observation I'm going to make here is this. The calling of God's people, Christians, is to make the world a more beautiful place. It's to make it more beautiful. Central to the Christian faith that we practice here is creating beauty. Creating beauty in our midst. That means more songs, more color into our lives, more redeemed relationships. Because when we see people who were not getting along, but they finally get along, you look at that and say, that is beautiful. That means more generosity. When you see somebody who is in need and somebody selflessly says, you could have what I have so that you're no longer in need, we look at that and say, wow, my faith in humanity has been restored. That's beautiful. Forgiveness, finally letting go of the things that's been hurting you. Healing people. Putting people first, sacrificing yourself for other people. These are beautiful things. And he says, that's the role of a Christian, to make the world more beautiful, looking at the ugliness of the world and the darkness of the world and adding color and adding light, adding salt, making the world more heaven-like. He says that's the job of a Christian. That's what qualifies this whole movement as something that is God-sent, because we are the people who brings light into this world. And guys, I have experienced this firsthand. Some of you guys know that a few weeks ago, we finished a series called Creating Space. And we were talking about how we need to create space for the queer community in this community. And since then, I've gotten a lot of great emails, but there have been a few that have not been so nice. And it's interesting because these not so nice emails are not coming from people like you and me. They're coming from pastors. And they're like, oh, God, like so angry. And what made it so hard, so I expected this to happen. So it's not like, like surprise. It was more like the people that I thought had my back were the ones who emailed me and said, I'm disappointed in you. As a matter of fact, the most recent email I got was this past week. And in this email, this person said, he said, how could you, what was the word? It wasn't ignore. What was I can't remember, but it's something along the line of, how could you ignore scripture? Which, that's like my thing. I don't like to ignore scripture. And then this email ended with, if you think Christianity is so harmful, which I didn't say that, but that's what he got, what new religion have you adopted because you're clearly not Christian? And I'm like, and what really sucks about this, can I say suck? Sorry. Did you know the first sermon I preached at Westlight, I think I said crap, and then I'm like, can I say that? And then Paul came up later, he's like, hey, Kotz, that was the crap, man. Like, you gave me a fist pump. Anyways, that's Westlight for you. Okay. What really hurts about this is that this specific pastor was a friend, and he actually at one point mentored me. And so it was really hard to get that. It wasn't so much of the content, it was like who it came from. And at that point, you feel like really alone, And he made accusations about me that were not true. I think he made a lot of assumptions about me. And, but at the same time, some of you have sent emails to me, encouraging me. And in the darkness and the ugliness of where I was sitting, you brought beauty and hope and forgiveness and generosity into my life. That's what Christians are supposed to do. We bring life into places that are dead. During the series, some of you came and talked to me about how, I feel like this new sense of life that's bubbling inside of me. And to hear that from you, it just brought more life into my life. Some of you, by the way, moms of Westlight, some of you just came up to me, it's like, I have nothing to say, but I just want to give you a hug. And I'm like, mom hugs are like the best, right? And I'm like, dude, you guys are so good at bringing life into the dead places of our society. And you guys, I've experienced that here at this church. You guys are amazing. Some of you guys have sent me a card. And there are people who watch us online, and they're like, hey, you don't know me, but I just want to say thank you for being brave enough for you and your congregation to bring this to light. And that just brings me so much life. You guys are already doing the thing that Jesus asked everybody to do, which is to bring beauty into this world. You already brought beauty into my life. And I can't even imagine, that's just here on a Sunday morning, right? I can't imagine the life and the beauty you're bringing to the people outside these four walls. So the question I want to end today with is this. How have you created beauty in your world recently? That's what it means to be a salt and a light to the world we live in. A simple thank you to a server who's had a really rough day, or leaving a big tip, even though they don't deserve it. That's bringing light into the world. Being a father figure to somebody who just lost their father. And I heard a lot of you people at this church have done that. That is being a light, being salt in this world. Sacrificing some of your resources to let people know that I'm on your side, that's exactly what God did for us. That's what it means to be the salt and light of this earth. And that message could be extremely, extremely offensive if you're actually on the other side, the people who weren't a light. And God is saying, sorry, your time of being a light and the salt is over. I'm now going to hand it over to the people who you see are beneath you, because I believe that is how we're going to bring life into this world. Amen? All right, let's pray.